Hi, welcome back to our Algebra 1 playlist. On this video, we're going to look at how to find the inverse of a quadratic function. So in this case, I do not have any parentheses, at least on these first four examples. So what I want to do is I want to, first of all, switch your x and y. And I want to isolate, I want to get the y squared by itself. So I need to get rid of anything over here that's not with the y squared. Now, that was not in parentheses, so that would be my first step. I cannot combine any like terms, so I have x minus 17, just write it down exactly like that, equals y squared. And now this is where you really have to understand what your opposite operations are, right? You're trying to undo a squared to get just y. So if I want to undo a squared, the opposite of squaring a number is to square root that number. So I can square root both sides. And notice that because I'm square rooting the entire side over here, the x minus 17 is going to be under the square root, under the radical. The y and y squared, or the y squared and the square root of y squared, right? Those two things are inverse operations, they're opposite operations. So they undo each other, and you're left with just y equals that stuff. So that would be your final answer. Let's try one more. Do it in green. So first thing you want to do is switch your x and y. And again, notice there are no parentheses here, so this negative 30 is not really bound to the exponent. There's no exponent with the negative 30, so I can undo that by adding 30. So I can do the opposite operation of minus 30. I will add 30 to both sides. And I'm left with x plus 30 equals y squared. And again, the only thing keeping this from being y equals is the squared. So I need to undo the squared. I need to undo the exponent by square rooting both sides. Squaring and square rooting are opposite operations, and I'm left with just y equals that square root of x plus 30. All right, why don't you take a minute here, pause the video, try to find the inverse of those last two equations, and then unpause to check your work. All right, you switch your x and y, and you should have y equals the square root of x plus 3. And then on this final problem, you should have y equals the square root of x minus 9. So that's how I would find the inverse function, as long as there are no parentheses. But what do I do if I have parentheses? Let me maybe add in, I'll add in one more, and I'm going to add in a challenge problem. So if you want to challenge yourself, you can try 8. So number 5. The difference here is that everything is being squared. The major operation that's happening to everything here in parentheses is I'm squaring things. So when I rewrite this equation, if I want to get this y by itself, I have to undo everything going on with these parentheses, which means that first I should undo that square. I should square root both sides. Okay. And if you're going to make a mistake, this is typically the spot where students will make a mistake. That negative 1 is not underneath any radical. So when I move that over, I cannot put that underneath the radical. That positive 1 on the other side has to stay outside of the radical. And I would get the square root of x, and then plus 1 outside the radical. Same thing on number 6. You switch your x and y, do it in blue. if you see parentheses, if everything is being squared, the first thing you have to undo is that exponent. So you need to square root both sides, and you get the square root of x equals y plus 5. And then again, that 5 is not underneath any radical, so when I undo that by doing the opposite operation, that negative 5 cannot go under the radical. It has to stay outside the square root. Why don't you pause the video, try number 7, and if you feel confident enough, try number 8, and then unpause to check your work. Okay, so 7, you should have ended up with y equals the square root of x minus 6. And on 8, this one's a little bit more challenging. So on number 8, let me clear out some of this extra stuff down below. On number 8, you've got to do a few things. There's one extra step here. So the new part that we have to do is I need to add the 1 that's outside parentheses first. So I'll write x equals y plus 1 squared minus 1. So I'll add 1 to both sides. You end up with x plus 1 equals y plus 1 in parentheses squared. And now it's the same process. But here, notice that this x plus 1, all of that, because all of that was on the left side together, all of that stuff goes under the radical now. I'll change to blue, and I have the square root of x plus 1 equals y plus 1. And then my very last step, I see plus 1, I need to minus 1, but because this was outside a radical, that minus 1 is going to stay outside the radical. You end up with the square root of x plus 1, and then outside that square root you have a minus 1. So that's how you would do quadratic inverse functions, at least the basic ones. Check out our other video on identifying inverse functions, and I will see you